This is Captain Tad Spacely, SS LoatheCast. We can't come to you this evening because of the fault of my crew. It's not my fault, it's the fault of the crew. So, tune in next month for the space episode. Enjoy a reading by Owen R. Smith and Patrick Daly tonight. Thank you, and goodbye.
Good evening. Thank you for showing up tonight for the book release party for Owen R. Smith. We've also got Pat Daly is going to be here to read some of his second book. Pat edited Owen's book, so there's a little connection there. I mean, regardless of the title. There's the proof right there on the title page. So buy lots of books. Buy 3, buy 4. Clap loud, and please welcome Patrick Daly.
Or stay way away. You don't know what's going to happen up here. I sure as hell don't know what's going to happen up here. Okay. I'm just going to get started. Trained monkey hired to entertain. The thoughts returned. God, not again. Not another of these goddamn signings. How many times in the last 60 days has he thought this, or worse, at the door of a bookstore where his agent had scheduled him? Tad Weeks was a novelist. Now, that much was certain. The sign was in the window. A major publisher had filled several thousand books with his words. The years of struggle and toil were past, and these were the gravy days. Or they were supposed to be. So why did this seem worse? Why was he remembering the years of sitting in that shitty little San Francisco hotel room drinking cheap vermouth and clawing out pages of story beginnings and crappy little poems? And now, at the top of his game, when the reward was his, why was he getting the fear? The manager of Comfort Closet Booksellers greeted him at the door. "You must be Mr. Weeks." "I must be," Tad said. "I'm Shalia. We're so glad you could make it tonight. Can I get you anything?" Shalia Smith Halia was written on the name tag taped to her lavender-colored hemp dress. Shalia, she had said, emphasizing the uniqueness of her name, and hyphenated, of course. Her words and her manner suggested something thickly liquid, phlegm, most likely. A bong hit and a blowjob is what Tad wanted to say. "No thanks. I'm fine," was what he said instead. All these places were the same, he thought. The same smarmy names, the same false intellectualism. He couldn't even remember just now what town he was in, and it didn't matter. He still had another month of these things to endure. The lobby of tonight's bookstore was scattered with middle-aged swells, men wearing turtlenecks and women wearing bright-colored silk scarves. They carried plastic glasses of white wine and an air of collected self-assurance. They chatted in groups of 3 or 4, mostly about so-and-so's latest work and such neo-post something or other. God, how he hated these people. These were the people who made his life before such a nightmare. He had served them coffee, had gotten them their car after nice nights on the town. He made their sandwiches or juice smoothums. He had to work, and he had to eat too, and pay the rent and buy whatever drug worked to get them out of his head while he wrote stories about them. "I'll never be like them," Tad used to say to his friends, what friends he ever had. And now here he was, a trained monkey hired to entertain them, to feed their false little heads with literature, and they would eat them up, his words, all because of the set. Nothing changes now, does it? Misconnection. I couldn't believe what I was reading. You, tall, crazy, curly-haired in blue coat. Me, squashed at the back of the 30 Stockton bus last Tuesday. Red hair, black leather jacket, holding a potted palm. You got on in Chinatown, fought your way to the rear door, and looked into my soul. We must have known each other forever. I wanted to chase you when you got off at Union Square, but I couldn't. I'm chasing you now. Please, call me. Ad number 07443. Jesus, I don't even read these things. But for some reason, I picked up this week's San Francisco Weekly Reporter and looked into the personals. I don't know why, just on a whim, I guess. But I remember that day, that bus ride, and that girl. Holy cow. I didn't think much of the exchange then. I have these one-sided encounters in my mind a lot. On some days, I can imagine most every beautiful woman on the street, and believe me, there are a lot of them in San Francisco. I imagine them having just shot me a come-hither look. So I filled myself with with an imagined pride, smiled at myself, and just walk on. But that girl on that bus was different in a way, I guess. And I was just having a normal day. Nothing going too terribly right, but nothing going too terribly wrong either. You know what I mean? It was just normal. And then there was nothing extraordinary about that bus ride either. You get on the 30 Stockton there at Broadway, fight the little old Chinese women just to get on. They seem to think that they're going to get left behind, so they fight to the front of the line, and we let them. And I knew from experience that the almost crowded bus would fill to the brim in the next 3 stops, and that none of the people would make any effort to move toward the back. And it's kind of crazy to see from the street. A bus will be packed with people elbow to eyeball in the front half, so the folks have to stand in the stepwell when the door is closed. And the back half has room enough for popular dance moves. Knowing this, I make my move early, and I say in a firm voice, excuse me, and I just move and keep moving toward the back door. That's the dividing line somehow. Past that back door is wide open Muni acreage. The first half is the Muni stockyards. And that's when I saw this girl. I settled at my standing post looking around and saw her looking at me. I remember thinking, wow, a pretty redhead in a black leather jacket with a plant. Huh. Now, it's no secret that I have a thing for redheads. This takes some explaining and gets sorry and sad quick, so I won't get into it here. But on this normal day I was having, even this sight, black leather and red hair, my favorite color scheme, was flatline. I wasn't going to get into any self-indulged fantasy, not on this bus ride. So I just looked at her. I think I smiled and rolled my eyes a bit and smiled back at her, and she smiled back at me. Now, looking back on it, I should have known that it was something. I don't get that far with most of my public dreams. The eye contact passes immediately, and that's that. Or if for some reason the look continues, I have a habit of quickly looking away. Don't ask why. But this time I didn't look away. I didn't want to, so I just didn't. I just smiled at her, and she smiled at me. So I guess I was looking into her soul, if I'm to believe what I read in that ad. I've read that ad about 700 times now, if you're wondering, and I know what the thing says forward and back. I even cut it out on the damn paper, had it blown up and stuck on the wall by my computer. That's where I am now. The short ride up Stockton and through the tunnel can take 3 minutes or an hour, depending on traffic. I recall this one being somewhere in the middle. There are 3 stops before the tunnel, and like I said, the bus gets full. The little old Chinese will clamor on the back door, given half a chance, and they always do. So you get jostled around, things get packed and crazy, Canton and Mandarin fill the air so as to flush out any thought you may have, and you just sort of hold on for sanity. That's just what I did. I remember having to turn back, and on the back of the bus, some old woman with pink plastic bags filled with fish heads was standing on my foot. And I got off at the Sutter Street stop, the first one after the tunnel. And that's it. It says water, so it just might be. Thank you. Thank you again. Shitty blood from turnips. That goddamn cat is out there again, pissing and moaning, mostly moaning. I never should have fed her. Goes to show what a modicum of kindness will really do for you. But if that cat was the least of my worries, I'd be content. Shit, I'd be ecstatic. See, I've been indicted on some fraud charges, and my wife thought that night on coke really meant I really did like her clothes and that neighbor boy. Phew. Can anybody take a joke? The credit card company sure can't. It seems they want their money every month. And so do the vicious mugs who really own my car and my house. And I thought the story in the paper was a bit one-sided, and it wasn't my side, I tell you. And they would have to print that photo of me in a jail jumpsuit with my hair in the same mess it was when I crawled out of that sewer. I didn't think that was fair, not one bit. And that's not a cute metaphor. I really did have to crawl out of the sewer, since my plan to scare my wife and her lover went to shit. The manhole cover in a cul-de-sac being loose was a salvation, or so I thought, when Chad didn't back down from my fake bomb and phony crazy act. It seems that Pac-10 athletes can run as fast naked as they can on the field. Good for Chad, when I think on it now. But I didn't want to get my block knocked off, so I did what I had to do, and that was crawl into a hole in a cul-de-sac and swim through shit. That's not a metaphor either. It really happened. The shitty thing was coming out on the other side in a grass field owned by some hippies. Nice couple in other circumstances, but what with a full-scale police search on, they met me with AK-47s or 48s or whatever, drawn on my being. Peace, dude, but don't fucking move. So that's how I got popped. Popped is a term I learned in jail. Jail is better than prison. Prison is better than hell, and hell is where I'm going eventually. I have to die first, and that may be next. Or not. I'm out now, some months hence. I can't get work. I owe a shitload of money. And my wife is suing me for several reasons, none of which are really true. And there's those indictments. Well, they'll get what's left, I suppose. Can't get blood from a turnip, eh? But I'm doing okay. This little roadside motel isn't so bad now that I moved away from the vending machines and got a gun. And there is a cute little cat out there in the back. Just don't feed her. She'll just moan and make you think of why you're here. Salt of the earth. This isn't anything against the salt of the earth. You know those on this shelf. They try so hard, barking up trees they didn't plant, tossing against tides they only see. So they work hard and medicate and fuck a lot. Mark is one, fielding phone calls, lemming-like, temp work, daily pay. Rachel cleans houses when she can, 2 kids with fathers. Mom's in detox, dad's dead with bills. She hopes the Toyota starts. So when Mark meets Rachel early Friday, drunk and throwing darts, American hope springs desperate. They lay naked, sweaty, spent, salting the earth. Okay, that's it. And now, proud to introduce a good friend, Owen R. Smith. This is his show.
You know, I spent 3 hours on the drive over here trying to think of what I'd say up here, and I got nothing, so we'll just start with this. We'll start with some poetry. It's called Bitch Button. I called you the other night when I walked the aisles of the local grocery. I was bored or lonely or both, and I thought maybe I would see if you were either. You let the phone ring twice, and probably without much thought, sent me straight to voicemail. This one is called Wordless Communication. She and I see this couple at another table. They're making kissy face and smiling the telling smile of a blissful couple. We exchange a knowing glance, eyebrows arched, eyes laughing, sharing in our silent joke, realizing that could have been us. I'm going to go and read this story called Absolution. It starts the book out. Arriving in the city did not lighten Hugh Larrister's sullen mood. He'd expected to feel soothed once he stepped off the number 11 overnight and onto the massive platform at Central Station. But there was no comfort in the cold, gray concrete or the massive throng of faceless passengers engaged in an intricate dance of entrance and egress. Instead, there were 3 flights of stairs leading to the station's elegant main terminal. Larrister slung his bag over his right shoulder and, shoving his typewriter case under his arm, huffed up the stairs. He wasn't particularly tall or athletic, and the trek caused small beads of perspiration to form on his furrowed brow. As he fumbled for a handkerchief, the typewriter crashed to the ground with a jarring bang. Larrister mumbled a curse and replaced the case under his arm. He silently pined for the comfort of a warm bed and the solace of dreamless sleep. Pushing his way through the crowded station plaza, Larrister barely noticed the dozens of immense chandeliers lining the ceiling above, nor did he recognize the intricate geometric patterns etched onto the ebony marble beneath his feet. Suppressing a yawn, he was surprised to see that the Central Station clock read just 28 minutes past 8 o'clock. A solitary chime echoed through the station, marking the half hour as he stepped into the chilly night rain. He flagged down a pedicab and climbed into the open-air buggy. The city thrummed with an energy Larrister found refreshing after his recent stay in the countryside. He asked the pedicab driver, a rail-thin man with woolly tufts of white hair forming a crown on his otherwise bald head, where he could find an inexpensive hotel somewhere quiet. The driver chuckled mirthlessly, and after a $3 ride, dropped Larrister in front of the Jupiter Hotel. He scowled as Larrister tossed him a handful of change as a tip. For all of the elegance Larrister missed walking through Central Station, he took in every sorry detail of the Jupiter. Once the city's premier hotel, the Jupiter teetered on the edge of becoming complete rubble. But it wasn't rubble quite yet, and when Larrister pushed his way through the lobby doors, he imagined the Jupiter how it must have been 30 or 40 years ago. Most of the lobby's original furniture had been removed, but there were a couple of chairs and a subway bench, the latter of which was currently occupied by a transient too high to make it to his hovel. Gathering his drenched belongings and shaking off a very bad feeling, Larrister trudged to the main desk and was surprised to find someone waiting to greet him. "I need a room," he said. The slender man behind the counter extinguished his cigarette. He wore a vest, hastily fastened so that each button missed the proper hole by one spot, and a pained expression that appeared to be a grimace, but Larrister suspected that it may have been the man's attempt to smile. Yes, plenty of those," the man said through his grimace. $10 a night." "That'll be fine," Larrister replied. He pushed a night's rent onto the counter and grabbed the key to room 811. The hotel had one working elevator, which strained and creaked as it carried Larrister to his room on the 8th floor. It came to a rest with a grinding halt, and Larrister peered into the dimly lit hallway. Room 811 was all that Larrister had expected: a small metal desk, a stool, a sagging bed, bars on the window, a dresser. He sat on the desk and pulled out his wallet. After the train ride and hotel room, he was down to just $120. That wasn't going to last long in the city. He sighed and reached into his front shirt pocket for his pack of cigarettes. Almost gone. He lit one, a Wilshire Gold, and inhaled deeply. As the nicotine hit his brain, he relaxed slightly and took a sip of whiskey from his hip flask. The thought of finding work made him tense, and he laughed heartily as if to no one, as if to ward off the thought. As the rain poured steadily outside, he caught a glimpse of himself in the window. He'd gotten thin, almost as thin as the man behind the hotel counter. He wasn't eating or sleeping. He felt hollow. He opened the desk drawer and found, to his surprise, a small, loaded pistol. Larrister had served in the war and was familiar enough with firearms. The weapon did not frighten him. Instead, he became consumed with a horrible thought. How easy it would be, he mused, aim this gun at my head and just end it all. He picked the pistol up. It felt heavier than he expected. Suddenly, Larrister's breath caught halfway down his throat. Despite the fact that his wife had left him and his job had fired him after he failed to show up for a week straight, he still had a chance to make things right. Perhaps he could find work. Maybe his wife would change her mind. All he needed was time. He tried to return his breathing to normal, but his heart thumped insistently in his chest, and each breath he drew in was more ragged than the last. He felt bitter pains of anger explode from within his guts and outward, till his whole body writhed in rage. He screamed an unintelligible oath, a desperate howl that seemed to consume him. Tears started to inch their way down Larrister's cheek. He reveled in the pain he felt, tried to own it, enjoy it, but that's not the way it is with pain. Life had been reduced to that room, a couple of bucks left in his pocket and a gun in his hand. That wasn't the way... Bug. That wasn't the way... That wasn't the way it was supposed to turn out. Leaning back in his chair, Larrister gently cocked the hammer on the pistol. It clicked into place with a satisfyingly thick noise. He spent the rest of the night cocking and uncocking the gun, staring into the barrel and wondering if he had what it took to pull the trigger and finally be done with all the misery and disappointment. When he woke up many hours later, the gun was still clutched tightly in his hand, ready to offer absolution. This is called Your Ghost Takes Flight. I woke up slowly, savoring the warmth of a body next to me. In this semi-conscious state, it was easy to convince myself the scenario could be one of a dozen more appealing situations than the one I found myself in, waking up next to an old lover, an ex-lover. As I came to, I noticed my arms were wrapped tightly around her, and the distinct pepper-sweet smell of her skin after a day without showering made me swallow hard. I needed to piss, but I didn't feel like getting up. The moment would be lost, whatever kind of moment it was. She started waking up too and snuggled closer to me, letting a small sigh escape as she turned to face me. We didn't speak, and I searched her large brown eyes for the absolution that had thus far escaped me. Things didn't have to be this way, except that I had no way of knowing it at the time, as is often the case with these kinds of matters. For all of my implied maturity about the situation, I was a petulant, obnoxious, and self-loathing bundle of nerves. Maybe not to her, maybe not all the time, just when it counted. As I started to wake up, I reminded myself to keep my mouth closed for once. I figured it would be easy this time. She was naked except for a pair of red panties, one of my favorites when we'd been seeing each other a lifetime ago. I leaned against her and could feel blood rushing to my groin, so I turned away a little bit. She readjusted and pressed her body into mine, but I could tell it wasn't sex she wanted, just a bit of fleeting intimacy with someone who you know still cares. My head was splitting, and I suddenly realized what an ass I'd been the night before. It didn't surprise me. As it was, I could barely stand the sight of her without raging pangs of regret making my stomach contract. If I'd played my cards differently, maybe we'd be making love right now. Instead, we practiced a different sort of nonverbal communication, and it was all I could do to not start kissing her or cry or finally start saying all the pent-up things I'd practiced in my head so many thousands of times. I love you. I'm sorry things turned out the way they did. I miss you so much. I wish we'd made it. I wish I were different. I wish we could go back in time or freeze it right here in this moment. I wish. None of that happened, though. Instead, we lay there silent and motionless, both of us hoping the clock wouldn't reach 9:30. When it did, the alarm blatted and I slammed the snooze button with a ferocity that surprised me. 5 more minutes were the words either of us said. I think maybe it was me. You never did like waking up, she said, a touch of the old kindness creeping into her voice, reflexive. Yeah, I suppose you're right, I conceded, forcing a smile. My misery was complete as all those mornings together exploded into my mind, clamoring for attention, happy memories. So I guess I should call a cab and get going, she said. Brunch is in 40 minutes. I didn't say anything, just closed my eyes and tried to contain a sigh. I got the feeling this might be the last time I saw her for a long, long time. Okay, I said finally, breaking the silence, and we disentangled ourselves. She caught me staring at her naked breasts, and I blushed. An old memory, an inside joke, bubbles to the surface of my consciousness, and suddenly there was this incredible sadness pouring over me. It's nothing you haven't seen before, she said, breaking me out of it. Anyway, thanks for letting me crash here. I know you probably didn't. It's fine, I said, lying, cutting off whatever she was going to say that I didn't want to hear. It was good to see you, too. That part wasn't a lie. She dressed quickly, and by the time she was finished, the cab was outside the house, waiting to take her to wherever, someplace on the east side where a hot breakfast and friendlier faces awaited. You can stay in bed, she said. That's okay, I told her. I'll lock you out. We walked down the stairs, and I opened the front door for her. We hugged, made what we were both sure were empty promises to stay in touch, and she walked, rather daintily, down the front steps and jumped into the black radio cab waiting in the middle of the street. I watched it speed away, make a quick U-turn, and head up the hill and out of sight. All right, one more. This is my tribute to Kafka, I suppose. Ed likes it. It's called Charlotte the Magical Spider. Charlotte had 8 legs, but I hardly ever saw her use them. Usually she was content to huddle herself in the corner, eyes pointed toward the door, watching, judging. When I first moved into this apartment, I started feeding her ants from around the kitchen sink. I suppose I took a somewhat antagonistic pleasure in killing the goddamn pests and feeding them to the magnificent Charlotte, who ruled over the bathroom with regal dignity. I first noticed something unusual when I sat down on the toilet one day and she lowered herself to eye level. I blew at her and she swayed back and forth on a single glistening strand. "What do you want, Charlotte?" I asked absentmindedly, secretly wishing she would just head back into her corner so I wouldn't be tempted to squish her. "St," she hissed at me. "Are you talking to me?" I asked. She held her ground and I leaned closer. "Hey," she warbled in a pitch so high it was almost indiscernible. "What the fuck?" I stood up and pulled my pants. "I hate ham," she yelped in a strange voice. "I want more ants, not ham." I thought clearly this is a sign there is a God, or there isn't. Either way, something terrible and serious was happening. I was losing grip with reality. "So all you're gonna do is bitch, eh?" I spat at her, choosing to ignore the illogic of entertaining this conversation. "Who do you think pays the rent around this place?" "I'm Charlotte, the magical spider," she tweeted sweetly. "I will grant you one wish of your choosing." "Bullshit. You're not magical at all. I'm just fucked up, drunk, high or something, not right upstairs." "You're pathetic," she said, her voice suddenly becoming whiny and needy. "I'm bored. This house is so boring. Buy me a trash magazine." "What?" "You know, with celebrities. Buy me an Us. I want an Us." "How the fuck do you know about celebrities? And Us? What the hell is going on here?" "You're the one who made the mistake of anthropomorphizing me. You tell me," she said archly. "All right," I said, my voice rising into a scream. "Time for you to get back in your corner. I've had enough of this badgering." "Could this be more boring?" she said, rolling at least 3 of her eyes. I poked my finger at her and she daintily climbed onto my hand. Her 8 legs made me cringe. She cleared her throat. "What a good boy," she said. "So well-mannered." "You are nature's cruel joke," I told her, "and you're goddamn ugly, too." "And you're a dick," she replied, biting me. It didn't really hurt, though. "Now your finger is going to turn gangrene. Now your whole hand is going to fall off." "You're not that kind of spider," I said. "All this does is piss me off." "That's fine." "Why? Just why?" "Welcome to Loserville, population U," she squeaked, clicking her legs in delight at her joke. That joke sucked, Charlotte. She was silent for a couple of seconds, letting the rebuke hang. Finally, she spoke. "I'm bored of the bathroom. I want to live somewhere else. I want to live in the living room. That's where people live." "Yeah, people. Not ugly little talking spiders. I'll squish you before I let you live anywhere but your corner." She leapt off my hand and onto the bathroom sink. I could tell she wasn't happy. "You won't squish me," she said. "I've been living here longer than you." "Yeah, and I'm 100 times bigger than you. More than 100. "I hate you," she squealed. "Into your corner," I commanded her. She raced up the wall and leapt into her web. I peered up at her and she hissed at me again. I didn't see her for the next week. She'd found a small hole in the wall and had sequestered herself out of my view. I was glad. Charlotte's absence allowed me to pretend the whole incident had never happened. Anyway, part of me was convinced I had simply been drunk. Anyway, we'll take a short break so I can have 3 or 4 glasses of wine and sign a couple books, and then Pat and I will read again for a little bit, and then as many of you as want to can join us at Joe's Cellar. All right. Thanks a lot for coming.